Doctor Who, Season 10, Episode 7, The Pyramid at the End of the World. In this episode, the monks return at a war zone and the Doctor and Bill have to team up with the leaders of three of the biggest armies in the world to defeat the monks. Well, what can I say? This episode wasn't as good as last week, but it doesn't need to be because it's still a very good story that seems to be progressing well and ended with a good cliffhanger. So next week she'll hopefully wrap the whole lot up and it'll be very, very interesting. The opening that showed the previously through Bill recounting the events that Cher's told by the Doctor to her date was really interesting. I like that it was mixed up like that. It was how she was retelling it. And I absolutely love the ending of the President of the UN just turning up and ruining her date instead of the Pope. Absolutely brilliant. I was actually hoping this episode would be in the Matrix just so it could happen next week again. I just love it. It was such a good joke. After the intro credits, of course, we continued with something that's become a bit of a thing now, where the Doctor gives a little bit of a speech about stuff at the start. And I'm really enjoying that. I think it works well with Peter Capaldi being an older Doctor, and it feels like he's instilling some wisdom onto the viewer as we start the episode. I really like the director's and probably the writer's choice to have the broken glasses and the broken bottle constantly replaying. Really quite ominous, even though it didn't seem to really have much impact beyond being quite artistic-y, I suppose, but it looked good. This episode touched on something that's happened before with the 10th Doctor, where he told Clara, you have to make the decision as to whether we blow up the moon or not, because she's human and it's not his planet. It touched on that with the soldier being like, well, Doctor, you've just made a good point. It isn't your planet, it's our planet, so we're going to make the decision we don't need you anymore. And also the fact that Bill, in the end, of course, consents to the monks as her being the only human left there, ready to make the decision. Quite interesting, the consent idea. I'm really not sure. I assume they wanted love, but consent is love, and you have to love them. But one would assume that Bill did it for her love of the Doctor, not her love of the monks. So just love in general may have been good enough. As, of course, the soldiers did not love the monks, and they weren't doing it out of love. They were doing it out of strategy, which, of course, they said is not consent, which is not love. A very interesting way of going about taking over the Earth, for sure. Biological warfare is definitely a looming threat in reality, so it's kind of cool to have an episode where the actual threat wasn't the monks. They were there and they were intimidating, but they weren't the problem. The problem, of course, was just a lab accident. So simple. I thought it may have been a zombie apocalypse, which would have been really cool to have seen more of, but we've already done Oxygen. That had kind of zombies. But really interesting threat there. And, of course, the Doctor pulls it off just at the end, and he's got his sight back, so maybe we'll see a bit more energy out of him in the next episode. Overall, I give this episode a 7 out of 10. It wasn't as good as last week, which we're assuming is part 1. And next week, of course, we'll hopefully round out a good story. But as the first half of a story, it was solid, but wasn't the best. Because, of course, it wasn't a fully rounded story. We got to the middle of it. We still need the conclusion, the rest of the story. And then I reckon it would definitely, overall, the arc will be like a 9.5 out of 10 or a 9. But, yes, this week, 7 out of 10. Please like, comment, subscribe. Talk to me in the comments about what you thought on the episode, and I will talk at you guys next week.